The world's a pretty big place. With our busy lives, no reasonable person can be expected to keep up with the biggest headlines each week, so I'm here to do it for you. This is Tony Pearson coming to you on behalf of WHIP with this week's Big Picture. This episode is going to be a little bit shorter than usual. There are really only three things I want to touch on from the past week. Primarily, a big defeat for internet privacy here in the US, a quick update on the Russian interference case, and most importantly, I think, some breaking reports of some serious human rights related crimes going on in Russia, specifically the Chechen Republic. So let's get right to it. Starting off on the topic of internet privacy, this past week, Congress voted to repeal the Obama administration's protections on internet privacy. Specifically, these were protections about how certain corporations could use data collected from individual consumers. The law required certain companies, specifically ISPs or internet service providers, to get permission or consent from their customers before selling their data, for example, browsing histories and stuff like that. Even after Congress voted to repeal this past week, some people thought that the White House would shoot it down, but on Thursday, the White House actually released a statement supporting this decision. So let's take a moment to talk about how this data is actually used and what it actually looks like. There is a lot of money to be made in targeted advertising and trend analysis. The internet is unique in that way because for the first time, really, I want to say in human history, we haven't really had a form of media like this. You can collect information on a lot of people fairly accurately and easily. As individuals visit websites, click on links, look at pictures, stuff like that, data is constantly saved about where they've been, what they've been looking at, stuff like that. You can see this in your browser when you look at the history. In fact, you may have noticed, for example, when you shop on Amazon, you might spend an evening looking for, let's just pick something random, like underwear online, and the next day you might find that Amazon starts advertising socks to you because they think you might want to buy that if you've already bought your underwear. That's kind of a random example, but that's the whole purpose of this, is to target advertisements at people instead of just kind of randomly advertising things at people like you'd see on TV or the radio. For companies like Amazon, Google, and Facebook, this is kind of their entire business model. They give you a service in exchange for your data. And to their credit, these companies, I think at least, make it pretty clear that that's what they do. Usually when you sign up for an account, there's some kind of I accept to these terms and conditions. You might not read that, but at least with my experience with Google, they don't try to hide the fact that they're using your data to advertise things back at you. Now, the law that just recently got changed, or is about to get changed, Trump hasn't actually signed the law yet, it just looks like he's going to. That law wasn't really concerned with these individual sites. Instead, it was aimed at ISPs or internet service providers, and it said that they couldn't keep or sell your data without permission. In fact, I believe it was specifically that they couldn't sell it. They might even be able to track it. The reason why this law focused on ISPs before it did other companies is because ISPs are much more powerful in this regard. Companies like Google and Facebook may have access to links and ads you click in certain contexts. For example, Facebook knows when you click on something on your news feed, and Google knows when you click on something in a Google search, for example. But these companies are still somewhat limited to areas that they actually have access to, deals that they've made with other websites, stuff like that. ISPs are different because they effectively act as the gatekeepers to the internet. They have access to everything you do because they're the ones who let you on to the internet, unless you're using some kind of VPN to encrypt your traffic, which I'll probably talk about more in detail in another episode if there's enough interest. But it goes without saying that most people aren't using advanced techniques like this to mask their information. They're just using the internet the way it's given to them. So because of this power that ISPs have, because of the nature of the service that they provide, that they give you all of this access to the internet, and they can essentially see what you're doing, the Obama administration thought it was a good idea to prevent them from selling your data because they could, in theory, have way more of your data than just about any other company out there. without at least getting your consent first. Now, people who argue against this law have said that it doesn't make sense that we're restricting this sort of practice for ISPs and not for companies like Google and Facebook, as I mentioned earlier. And while I do think that ISPs and companies like Google and Facebook are kind of in two different ballparks when it comes to this sort of data collection, they certainly did have a point. And because they have a point, a lot of people, myself included, thought that if this law was going to be changed, it would be done in a way that would apply to corporations like Google and Facebook. In other words, it would be expanded. Instead, Republicans in Congress, and this was a vote that happened down party lines, Republicans in Congress just scrapped the law entirely. So now, instead of making the consumer protections meet the harsher laws that apply to ISPs, they've just done away with it completely. So, with those laws gone, your internet service providers can sell without your consent information relating to finances, medical information, social security numbers, web browsing history, mobile app usage, email and online chats, pretty much anything that's not encrypted, which before you panic, a lot of that stuff is, but any of it that isn't, there's also a lot that isn't, is kind of up for grabs now, where it was in the process of being made not up for grabs before Congress did this. So this is obviously bad for consumers, and it's bad for privacy in general. I'm usually not someone who takes a stance on these things and goes, oh, well, this is wrong, and I think that party X is responsible, and I'm really angry. But in this case, this is wrong. This is clearly anti-consumer. It's anti-privacy. It is bad for just about everybody connected to the internet, except for these companies, and I am extremely disappointed in the Republican Party for repealing these regulations. If anything, they should have been expanded. And considering the Republican Party is a party that prides itself on protecting privacy and individual liberties, I'm just disappointed. Anywho, if this makes you as uncomfortable as it makes me, I suggest you read up on VPNs and what they are. They are essentially ways that you can mask your internet traffic before it gets to your ISP so that you can browse the internet and stuff like that more securely. There are lots of guides to set them up on the internet. If I feel there's enough interest, I might even do an episode of The Big Picture covering VPNs and how they work in more depth. In the meantime, though, just be aware some extremely anti-consumer laws just got passed, or I guess what would make more sense to say is some very pro-consumer laws just got repealed. And if you care about privacy on the internet, you shouldn't be happy about this. Moving on for a really quick update, and I do mean really quick because there's not much to say on this that isn't speculation. Former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn offered to be interviewed about his involvement with Russia and the Trump administration in exchange for immunity this past week. This is really kind of freaky because the fact that Flynn was seeking immunity suggests that there is some kind of fear of criminal repercussions for him. And also the fact that he essentially wanted to testify means that he knows something that clearly isn't good. And the fact that, well, I didn't get to this part yet. This request was actually denied by the agencies that are currently investigating the Trump administration, which is even freakier still, because it means that either Flynn is too important to be given immunity in whatever it is they're investigating, or they already have whatever information they think they could get from him, or both. It always feels weird when I drop a story like this and then don't have much else to say on it. I don't, because in order to talk more about it, I'd have to get into a lot of speculation, and I really try not to do that on here, but yeah, that's kind of sketchy. So I'll keep you guys updated on that. If anybody close to Trump's administration does spill the beans and it turns out to be this crazy conspiracy, which I think I made it clear in the past, I'm a little bit skeptical about all that, but it also would not surprise me. I'll be sure to let you guys know. Now, for our second, final, and kind of depressing story, but it is important to talk about, I have a kind of breaking story from the Chechen Republic, which is a territory within Russia, which really is just a human rights violation and is something that I expect to hear a lot about in the coming week because, this is a big deal. Let's just get to it. Full disclosure first, these reports are effectively breaking right now. They were coming out on Saturday, which is yesterday for me. I'm recording this Sunday, the 2nd of April. And most Western media outlets are citing Russian newspapers, such as Novaya Gazeta, for this information. That said, based on what I've read/seen, these reports do seem to be legitimate. They're being backed up by some other Russian authorities, stuff like that. Now, on to what's actually being reported. Over the past week, men ranging from 16 to 50 years of age have been disappearing from the streets of the Russian territory. These men were detained for their, and I'm quoting here, non-traditional sexual orientation or suspicion of such. In other words, these men have been arrested for being gay or for being in the closet, not even openly gay. Not that it should even make a difference, but anyway, even worse, there are reports of at least 3 extrajudicial murders with a higher body count suspected. In other words, it seems local authorities in Chechnya are arresting and killing gay men. Yeah, I honestly don't even know what to say on this topic. Stuff like this I really thought was kind of behind us as a planet, but it seems that in some parts of the world, even advanced ones, because Russia, despite its different ideologies, is what I consider to be an advanced country, it seems that prosecution for things such as sexuality is still alive and well, and it seems that it can still cost people their lives. It's sickening, honestly. As refugees have begun to flee the region, and they are, according to reports, Russian authorities have thus far pointed the finger at local authorities for the move, saying that this has nothing to do with a larger Russian movement, even though in the past the Russian government has been anti-gay. I'm waiting to see if the Russian authorities actually do anything to crack down on what is, I think, a very obvious human rights violation. Honestly, if people are being rounded up and killed, these are crimes against humanity, I think. But like I said, Russia does not have a good track record when it comes to this stuff, so I'm not exactly hopeful. More than that, I really don't have much to say other than that. I hate to end the show on this kind of dark note, but when bad things like this happen in the world, I think it's important to know about it. Because if you don't know about it, you might think that these things have stopped happening. And they clearly haven't. And the fact that they haven't means that they clearly need to be fought still. Things like homophobia still need to be fought and educated against. Additionally, I think this serves as an important reminder that Russia is not our friend and is not a good country. And I say this keeping in mind that I'm not talking about Russian people. I'm talking about the Russian administration, which is a very important distinction to make. The Russian people, if anything, they deserve our report for deserving our support for dealing with this sort of an administration. But lately I've seen this trend of people almost cozying up to Russia, feeling like they are misunderstood and like it's this big Western propaganda against them. No. We've had trouble with Russia in the past. We haven't always been the good guys. But things like this happening, situations where people are being rounded up based on their sexuality and killed for it, it seems, are a reminder of what can happen when you get corruption and power concentrated like they are in that region. So no matter where you stand politically right now, do not let that cloud your judgment on these issues. Russia, or at least modern Russian administration, they're not a friend. Things like this are not to be taken lightly. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of WHIP's Big Picture. Tony Pearson coming to you guys on behalf of WHIP. Have a nice week, and be sure to tune in next week for more Big Picture.